right. Hi there, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our FEMA appeal training. My name is Whitney Bailey. I am the Disaster Response Project Director for AppalReD Legal Aid. I have been in this position for about a year now and been on the disaster team for about 3 years. And I am excited for you to join us. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat at any time. My colleague Erica Fields is also on here and will be monitoring the chat and helping to go through the presentations as well. This training is being recorded, and if you have any questions that you don't feel comfortable with including in the chat, feel free to shoot us an email after the fact and we will get back to you as quickly as possible. And we are going to get rolling here. So let me pull up our presentation just a moment. Okay. All right. So I know this is a little funky to see a floating head with a PowerPoint, but I think it makes a little bit more sense to know that I am here, not just a voice in the sky. And again, Erica, please feel free to pop in at any point. So today we are going to be focusing on drafting an effective FEMA appeal. There are a lot of things happening before you get to that FEMA appeal stage as far as the major disaster declaration and going into that immediate disaster response with those first responders and making sure survivors' immediate needs are met with food, shelter, medication, baby formula, things like that. So we are going to just dive straight into what happens after all of that. And the survivor submits their FEMA application. What next? And there. So this session, we're going to talk about that FEMA individual assistance eligibility, the application process, what types of assistance are available for disaster survivors, and then composing an effective FEMA appeal letter. How do you manage those client expectations? What are some reasons to submit a FEMA appeal in the first place? And then lastly, piecing that appeal together. Hopefully we'll have some time to go through our templates and you'll get to see what you'll be able to utilize. We have a lot of resources and are happy to share any and everything we have. And most of that is available on our website at this point, but we are constantly updating them and are more than happy to continue pushing those out to the public. So FEMA Individual Assistance, or IA, is provided through the FEMA Individuals and Households Program, IHP. And there are so many stinking acronyms whenever it comes to the disaster recovery world and FEMA land. So not only is there a whole FEMA acronyms, abbreviations, and terms book, it's about, I think, 300 or 400 pages long. It is very chunky. We do have it linked in this PowerPoint, which we are, of course, more than happy to share, along with some other important resources like the Individual Assistance Program and Policy Guide. It was recently updated in July 2025. I have not had the opportunity to really dig in to understand what the differences are in those updates, because I wasn't seeing some of the things that were mentioned in the FEMA March 2022, it's March 22nd, 2024 Individual Assistance Program and Policy Guide update memo. That update memo really cut out a lot of red tape that survivors had to deal with that FEMA appeal and application process. But like I'm saying, I wasn't seeing that whenever I was rolling through the July 2025 update. So stay tuned on that one. But we have whatever resources you may need or a survivor may need to help through that appeal process. So the individual assistance, there are a couple of different programs included once individual assistance comes into play. And of course, again, you've already had your major disaster declaration. Individual assistance has been included in that disaster declaration. And we are at the point of people on the ground, not just businesses, nonprofits, or local government agencies are able to request assistance from FEMA. With this, we are looking at individuals and households, just like the program says there. At this point, the state can also request that disaster unemployment assistance, or DUA, and DSNAP, or disaster supplemental nutrition assistance program, is available to survivors. So once we get to that once the applications are available for survivors, they apply through the Individuals and Households program. There is a 18-month period of assistance that a survivor has to make sure that after they apply, then they've got 18 months to try to get as many supporting documents that they need to provide FEMA in order to prove to FEMA, hey, I'm eligible for this, and this type of assistance, because there are several. Survivors who are living in temporary housing or receiving rental assistance also have may receive up to 18 months of rental assistance or continued housing. But those are not, you really want to try to focus on that 18-month period of assistance deadline. Let's see. So I'm not saying that survivors have 18 months to apply for assistance. Survivors have 60 days from the disaster declaration date to submit an initial application for assistance. So you have your disaster is declared, individual assistance is included in that declaration. 60 days from that date is how long you have to apply, not appeal. Application deadlines may and usually are extended. Those extensions do have to be requested by the governor's office, and you will generally see that 30-day extension. Sometimes you'll get an additional 30-day extension, but we really encourage survivors to make sure that they get that initial application of FEMA in within that first 60 days. There are certain reasons that FEMA will permit late applications, but it is very difficult to get past that hump. So please encourage folks to apply within that first 60 days. So some general eligibility points to make sure that that a survivor will have to hit on with FEMA is they need to either prove that they are a U.S. citizen and that they are who they say they are. They need to prove their identity. They'll have to prove that the disaster damaged address is their primary residence and that they own it or are a renter there. Renters are eligible to apply for FEMA assistance as well. You also have to prove occupancy, insurance, and that the residence was actually damaged by the disaster. And then you have some additional eligibility considerations for folks that are roommates, boarders, separated households, military personnel, students, and unhoused or homeless people. We will not be diving into those additional eligibility considerations, but the guidelines for those certain types of requirements and what other documents might be acceptable by FEMA are included in the Individual Assistance Program and Policy Guide. So first of all, you need to be a U.S. citizen, non-citizen national, or qualified non-citizen. So that includes lawful permanent residents. You need to be able to prove your identity. I've seen a lot with each of Kentucky's disasters over the last few years of folks need to submit their driver's license or social security card, for example, to prove their identity. But whenever you get to that proof of identity and some of those documents that help with that, especially if you're married, but maybe the maiden name is an issue because it's not the same as your spouse's or ex-spouse's even. I've got a red flag here because when you're impacted by a disaster, there's a good chance that you will not have access to these documents. If your home is completely flooded and washed away down the creek, or if your home is impacted by or a tornado and demolished in that way, you probably won't have your paperwork first off. So that's going to be a big hump for people to have to get through in proving their identity to FEMA in the first place. As we look into ownership, if you are a homeowner, FEMA has to confirm that you own the home at the time of the disaster. There was a memorandum in September 2021 that expanded the types of documentation that FEMA allows to verify home ownership. So it's not just providing a deed, because especially in Eastern Kentucky or just rural areas in general, a lot of folks own their homes through airship, or maybe it's a mobile home and you didn't update your title. So there are ways to get through that, and we'll dig into that here shortly. But you need to prove ownership. You need to prove that your home was actually damaged by the disaster. So if you're not eligible for FEMA assistance here, is what our example says. If your house was damaged by a kitchen fire before the tornado, you might be able to be eligible for FEMA assistance if you can prove that the kitchen fire occurred due to the tornado. For example, if there was some kind of electrical issues due to the disaster, and then this happened subsequent to. It's kind of tricky to prove. We have had a handful of cases that deal with something like this, but there are a handful of ways to get through it or attempt to. There was also an update in the March 2024 memo that I was alluding to at the beginning there, where if a part of the example here on this slide is if a hurricane survivor has wind damage to part of their roof because of a disaster, and then the other part of the roof was leaking before the disaster, but the other part of the roof was leaking before the disaster, FEMA assistance would only pay to repair part of the roof with the wind damage because of the disaster before March 2024. But now, thanks to this 2024 update, FEMA can now pay for all of the repairs to the survivor's roof to ensure that the roof is fully repaired so that they're able to live in their own home. So FEMA did expand their habitability criteria, which is a great thing for survivors. So as I was saying, with those documents that a survivor can provide FEMA to prove their ownership, there's a pretty lengthy list on here. We generally like to do a belt and suspenders moment with submitting at least 2 of these documents on the list if possible. We try to spoon feed FEMA as much information as we can to make sure we check all of their boxes. So anything from the actual deed of record, insurance policy, those property tax bills, those are incredibly handy. And then letters from your public official or the mobile home park, if that's where a mobile home is located. And then land installment contract or a rent to own contract, will or affidavit of heirship, and death certificate. There's a good amount of documents that you can provide to prove ownership to FEMA. There is a mobile home exception where you can write a self-declarative statement that you own a mobile home or travel trailer prior to the disaster, during the disaster. And again, these statements, there are certain boxes that FEMA requires a survivor to check off in that letter. We do have it in our templates, and it's also available in the September 2021 memo update that we are happy to share. So there is no hiding the ball with that self-declarative statement for the mobile home exception and proving ownership. But also, there's another red flag here, y'all. Whenever a survivor is impacted by a disaster, these documents might not be accessible. They might have been destroyed. And that's incredibly frustrating and overwhelming for a survivor to have to pause for a minute, stop thinking about those immediate necessary needs of shelter, food. Are my kids safe? Do they have shelter, food, clothes? What are we going to do about school? So this is another thing of, it's really overwhelming for survivors to have to work through this recovery process. So proving that the disaster damaged property was the applicant's primary residence is part of that general eligibility criteria. So your secondary home, your vacation home, that lake house out there, I'm sorry, if that's not where you live, if that's not where you're domiciled more than 50% of the year and you can't prove it, then you're most likely going to be ineligible for FEMA assistance. Landlords are also generally ineligible for FEMA assistance unless that disaster damaged residence is also where they're residing. I have seen cases where a child is renting from their parent and the parent is their landlord. So, you've got two separate households technically, but again, what can you prove? For occupancy, applicants, both those owners and homeowners and the renters must be able to prove that they occupied the disaster damaged primary residence and before receiving most types of FEMA assistance. So a lot of ways that FEMA can get through that occupancy hump are through providing utility bills or other types of documents like identification card or driver's license, motor vehicle registration, those rent receipts or lease housing agreement. There again, FEMA expanded the type of documents that you can provide, but another red flag, just like the proof of identity and ownership documents, while yes, we do have a lot of options and avenues to get through that hump, you might not have access to this, or it's going to take some time to obtain these or get them replaced. So it's very overwhelming. We understand the need for it, but it's just a lot for a survivor to handle by themselves, and why volunteer attorneys like yourselves are so important to support survivors through this process. As far as insurance goes, prior to that March 2024 update, if your insurance gave you more than the maximum amount available for a certain type of FEMA assistance, then you would be completely knocked out of FEMA assistance. That has thankfully changed to where if you have insurance, if you receive some insurance proceeds, but you still have a financial need on top of those insurance proceeds and can prove that, you're still eligible. But the thing is, you cannot double dip. You are not able to receive let's say auto insurance proceeds and you get $5,000 from your auto insurance carrier. And that completely meets your auto need. You are not eligible for additional FEMA transportation assistance because there's no duplication of benefits, no double dipping. That's why we've got our little ice cream cone up there. And in addition to that, FEMA does require a statement of coverage or a denial letter, or we like to provide both from the insurance company if the applicant states that they had insurance at the time of the disaster. The prior flood insurance requirement has been a kicker for a lot of AppalReD's clients, especially in further eastern Kentucky, who may have been flooded due to the July 2022 disaster and now have this insurance requirement. If there's a property located in a special flood hazard area and that person, or that property, excuse me, not person, received FEMA assistance, then there's most likely a flood insurance requirement on the property. The flood insurance requirement stays with the property, not the person. I'm going to say that out again. Flood insurance requirement stays with the property, not the person. So I've got a red flag there because holy cow, if someone is unable to maintain a flood insurance requirement because it's too expensive, or they didn't know that they had a flood insurance requirement on their property because they bought their house through a land contract from a relative, and the relative didn't disclose that there was a flood insurance requirement, or maybe they forgot, or maybe they didn't even know when they sold that property. FEMA will automatically send you this you're non-compliant with the flood insurance requirement letter, and knocks you out of a lot of types of assistance. There is some type of there are limited types of housing assistance you can get help from FEMA for. I just recently learned that the flood insurance policies now cover HVAC. So FEMA will no longer consider assisting survivors who had HVAC damage and a prior flood insurance requirement with housing assistance. But if there's any kind of furnace, well, or septic damage that occurred due to the disaster, those things are not covered by flood insurance, so you could still be eligible for FEMA housing assistance. But it's incredibly difficult to have that conversation with your disaster survivor client that, I'm sorry, I understand your situation, but you are ineligible for most types of FEMA assistance. It's situations like that where we make sure that we educate the client on that flood insurance requirement. Is there a way that we can submit maybe a hardship letter on their behalf? Or can we connect them with other resources like a disaster case manager, for example? A lot of disaster case managers, or DCMs, might know about grants that are available in their area outside of FEMA assistance. So it's a hard moment to have that conversation, but just be aware that sometimes it does have to come to that of, I'm sorry, but FEMA's not going to be the route that we should pursue in obtaining the financial assistance you need for disaster recovery. All right. So again, a survivor has 60 days after the disaster declaration to apply for FEMA assistance. Survivors can apply online, on the phone, through the FEMA app that you can download. You can mail your application. You can even go in person to a disaster recovery center, or DRC. But red flag there, if an applicant doesn't have social media, or their TV was destroyed, or they have some kind of a cognitive impairment or disability or a language barrier. How do they know to apply? As of this year, FEMA has stopped knocking on doors to assist potential disaster survivor applicants with their application. So we had some friends in Texas say that they've seen a lot less survivors submit that initial application because they didn't know. Or they didn't know how to do it, and they truly just needed someone to walk them through that process. So let's say your survivor client did get their application in on time. After it's submitted, a FEMA inspector will call the applicant directly to set up a date and time for a home inspection. We've got another red flag there, because what if your disaster survivor client doesn't have consistent access to a phone, or they live in a holler where they barely have any service to maintain a phone call? They're going to miss that call from the inspector, and they, after I believe it's 2 or 3 attempts from the inspector to connect with the client or survivor, then they'll get a letter from FEMA saying, hey, you need to contact us or your application is withdrawn, or they will just automatically withdraw an application due to the inspector not confirming that, yes, this address was actually damaged by the disaster. And at that point, a lot of people will just throw their hands up and say, okay, well, I guess I'm done. I can't do anything. When all they need to do is give FEMA a call, say, sorry, I missed it. I ran out of minutes on my phone, or whatever reason, I was in the hospital, whatever the situation is. A lot of people will just kind of, give up at that point. So, it's important to make sure you support them in that of, no, it's okay, just give them a call. We can get through this and pick the ball back up and keep on going. So at some point before or after that FEMA inspector comes to survey the disaster damaged residents, FEMA will send a letter to the applicant. FEMA will send a letter to the applicant to request supporting documentation to verify eligibility. I've seen that a lot with our 2025 disaster survivors of you need to provide proof of your identity and sending in your driver's license or social security card, whatever other documentation might be helpful or required from FEMA. And then within 90 days, FEMA should send a decision letter to the applicant stating whether or not they've been approved for assistance. If so, how much, or and what type of assistance, or if you need to request more. That's going to, once you receive that first letter from FEMA, that is your trigger to know, okay, these are my next steps. Those FEMA letters do tell you exactly what type of assistance you're approved for, how much, and then if you disagree with FEMA's decision, next steps. But the wall of text is incredibly intimidating for a lot of our clients, and another good reason why volunteer attorneys are impactful and necessary for disaster recovery. So before I get into this next part, I'm going to check out the chat, see if there's any questions here. All right. Not seeing any. I'm going to keep on rolling, but again, feel free to drop questions in the chat. And Erica, if you don't mind to put our emails in the chat real quick right now, so we know that it's in there, that would be really helpful. But now we're going to start talking about what types of housing assistance and other needs assistance are available to survivors. So for fiscal year 2025, the maximum amount of housing assistance is $43,600. And then for other needs assistance, the maximum amount is an additional $43,600. Those are the two main umbrellas that most types of assistance fall under for getting help from FEMA. That housing assistance is the main bucket that we really think of for getting home repair or replacement assistance. Hazard mitigation is there, so that could include maybe a retaining wall. And then lodging reimbursement, rental assistance, but that rental assistance amount does not count towards the maximum $43,600. It just falls underneath that umbrella for the bigger picture. And then for other needs assistance, we have that serious needs assistance. And for 2025, I've been seeing survivors get $770 for serious needs assistance. Prior to 2025, prior to the March 2024 update, it was called critical needs assistance. So the name has changed, the amount has gone up, but that serious needs assistance is for folks' very immediate needs. It's going to be for gas to get you out of that disaster damage area, for replacing baby formula, replacing medication, any immediate disaster needs is what that serious needs assistance is for. All right. Displacement assistance for 2025, folks have been receiving $1,540 for displacement assistance. And again, that award is not counted towards the maximum amount, but it does knock a lot of applicants out of receiving lodging reimbursement. That lodging reimbursement is if a survivor goes to a hotel and has to pay X amount of dollars a night immediately after a disaster. I would recommend that a disaster survivor still submits those hotel receipts to FEMA to be considered for lodging reimbursement. However, they will most likely be covered by that $1,540 of displacement assistance. And again, no double dipping. We can't receive lodging and displacement both if that need is met. Personal property assistance, medical, funeral, childcare, transportation, cleaning and sanitizing, computing devices, and then self-employed survivors. Those are all different types of assistance under that other needs umbrella that someone could be eligible for. Personal property and transportation are two of the bigger ones that I generally see a survivor get money for. So the maximum amount for 2025 disasters here in Kentucky is $7,875 for transportation complete replacement. And which, isn't a lot. If you lose a car and you get $7,800, that's wonderful. But, FEMA assistance is not a replacement for insurance, and it's not intended to make you whole. So something to keep in mind with that amount. And for the personal property assistance, we've had survivors be frustrated because they might receive, I don't know, a couple $100 for something that maybe, let's take a refrigerator, for example. Refrigerators aren't incredibly cheap. There are ways to get less expensive ones, but whenever you have a fridge, washer, dryer, all of these other appliances, furniture, all of the furniture in your house, all of your clothes, everything, those essential personal property needs are completely destroyed by a disaster. People get frustrated because the amount of personal property assistance they receive from FEMA is most likely not going to completely cover replacing absolutely everything for the exact type of item that was damaged by the disaster. Again, those computing devices are now eligible for FEMA assistance. There are certain things that you need, certain types of documentation you need to supply FEMA for them to consider replacing those devices. But if it was a school laptop or used for school laptop, it's something that FEMA will consider repairing or providing money to repair or replace. Again, that self-employed people are eligible for a new type of assistance per that March 2024 memo updating FEMA's guidelines here. It's a little tricky again because you have to have certain tax documents and other receipts and documentation to show that your necessary work equipment was damaged or destroyed and you need to replace it. But it is available, and there are ways to try to get that type of assistance for self-employed people. We have that maximum amount of 43,600 there. And survivors can allegedly max out in both categories. I haven't seen it happen. I've seen some people back from July 2022 become pretty close. They got really close to getting maxed out in both. But that personal property one is kind of tricky to get maxed out on. I would like to say that the chat should be enabled now if a participant has any type of question or something that they need clarification on. So feel free to check that out at this time or as a question pops up.
Can the attendees see where I put our emails in there? Will someone just give me a thumbs up if so, or just holler? Yeah. Okay, I will put them in there again. Okay. Thanks, Charnel. I'll put them in there again.
Thank you. All right. So digging in again to the different types of assistance and what they are for, and understanding all the different types of assistance that FEMA has available is really important whenever you are talking with a disaster survivor client, because you need to be kind of constantly issue spotting as they are telling you their story. And that I start off every client meeting with, so tell me about your disaster experience, if you don't mind sharing, and then tell me about your experience with FEMA and what type of money you've gotten so far. Most clients will bring their FEMA letters with them, so you can see it and sit there and go through the letters with them. But if someone doesn't receive certain type of assistance and they should have, that listening to their story while you're in that initial meeting is really helpful and important. So for rental assistance, again, there's not necessarily a monetary maximum that is for a survivor. But they can receive rental assistance for up to that 18-month period of assistance deadline. So not 18 months total, just up to, it could be 18 months total, but most survivors, they still need rental assistance, help with rent after that 18-month period of assistance, but they will unfortunately only be usually eligible for up to the 18-month period of assistance deadline. And again, it does not count towards the housing assistance maximum. As I was saying, for serious needs assistance, that's essential food items like food, water, baby formula, breastfeeding supplies, medication replacement, and any other serious disaster related needs. It's not a form of reimbursement for loss of power or replacing food. It's just emergency needs only. You do not have to keep your receipts as far as utilizing that $770 for 2025 disasters. But it does count towards the maximum amount of other needs assistance available. Another really wonderful update, thanks to that March 2024 memorandum, is that assistance for accessibility improvements does not count toward any assistance maximum. So what that means is if you had a wheelchair ramp before the disaster that was destroyed by the disaster, getting your wheelchair ramp repaired or replaced, that amount of money does not count towards that maximum 43,600 for 2025 survivors. If a survivor didn't have a wheelchair ramp or needed to have a grab bar in the shower, for example, if they let FEMA know that, hey, I need these accessibility items, then they could be approved for the assistance needed to buy them or repair them or replace them. And that doesn't count towards the maximum amount. I see a question in the chat here. If you need assistance afterward that you didn't need before, that also does not count toward the maximum, right? If you need assistance afterward, correct. No, for accessibility items, so ADA items does not count towards that maximum amount. Something that we want to make sure we hit on is FEMA recoupment. So after that 18-month period of assistance is up and a disaster is technically closed, FEMA has, I think it's 2 to 3 years to audit a disaster, audit disaster survivor assistance amounts, and can send these letters that are pretty intimidating to get, saying, hey, we think you might have received assistance when you shouldn't have. And we need you to explain to us that why you received this. Did you use it appropriately? Did they spend it improperly? Did they commit fraud? Did they double dip because they got insurance, didn't tell FEMA they had insurance? And then FEMA still gave them money. So FEMA can seek repayment for those things. It is a crime to do that. You please do not, please inform your clients, do not defraud the federal government. If we have some examples here at the bottom of the slide. So yeah, if you sign your uncle's name on a land contract 2 years after the uncle already passed away, that would be fraud, and you should not do that at all. It is a crime. You could be imprisoned. You could be fined up to $250,000 or both. And so, you definitely want to make sure that if you're getting any type of assistance, you want to, another example here is do not purchase a new dirt bike instead of repairing your roof. Home repair assistance is for home repairs and not for unnecessary personal property. People deserve to have nice things. They deserve to have a new dirt bike, but you must replace your roof. You must use your money the way that it is intended. So managing client expectations. Going into that client meeting, you want to be kind, you want to be patient, and you just want to listen. Listen to hear, not listen to respond. This is likely going to be one of the most traumatic, frustrating and overwhelming events that a survivor has ever experienced. And in some of our clients' lives, this isn't the first time that they're a disaster survivor. So they are just reliving that trauma again. Um, I always like to try to give my clients a solid 10-15 minutes to vent if they just need to, have somebody to hear them and get it off their chest before we get into the paperwork part. Because they deserve that opportunity. You want to be positive, but realistic. It's not uncommon for someone to receive more money if the issue was not uncommon to receive more money if there was an issue due to lack of supporting documents, or they needed to send in some updated documents. I always tell my clients, I can't guarantee an outcome because that final decision is on FEMA. But I know what boxes I need to check in order to, make FEMA happy. I try to spoon feed FEMA as much as possible whenever it comes to our submitting our appeals. We tell FEMA exactly what we've got enclosed. But it's, it's not uncommon to get a denial letter or get a letter from FEMA saying, you're not approved right now, or we just need more information. It's also important for clients to understand that they most likely will not max out on the type of assistance available. So it's not about how much money you think you deserve or you think you need. What can you prove to FEMA? Show me the paperwork, if you will. The purpose of FEMA money is to restore the survivor to the minimum living conditions, safe, sanitary, habitable. It's not like, suing someone for damages. It's not meant to make you whole. It's meant to get you to that bare minimum, which is really hard to swallow whenever you've lost absolutely everything. So what are some reasons to submit a FEMA appeal? I'm sure you are sitting there and you can think of a million different reasons, but yeah, why would a survivor need to appeal? Why would they maybe need an attorney? So every applicant has the right to appeal. And like I was saying, it's not uncommon for survivors to get more money after they file that appeal. The initial application process is difficult and to understand in general, but if someone has a cognitive impairment or just again that trauma of being a disaster survivor, knowing how to replace lost documents or figuring out what other supporting documents you might need. It's just super overwhelming. So having an attorney there to support you and, kind of just give you that guidance through the appeal process is really helpful. And, you don't have to be an attorney to submit a FEMA appeal, but sometimes it helps to have one on your team. And of course, there are some appeals that do involve true legal issues, like title clearing to prove home ownership. With AppalReD, we always like to provide holistic assistance to the client if possible. So, if someone comes to us with a FEMA appeal issue, but the deed to the home is in their mamaw's name, well, let's look into that. Can we help with the title clearing? Can we update the deed? What steps need to be taken? Can we at least advise them on that? And in the meantime, let's go ahead and try to knock out some estate planning documents like a will, power of attorney, living will, funeral planning declaration. I don't, most disaster survivors are just, people in general have more than one legal issue that we can hopefully help with and look into or advise on. So it's just something to keep in mind, why attorneys are really important with the FEMA appeal process. So when it comes to analyzing that FEMA appeal case, you want to review the survivor's decision letter, their application if they have it available. Some survivors will have access to their online disaster assistance portal, and that's really helpful because then you can get in there. You can download the PDFs of the letters. You can check out what documents a survivor has already submitted on their own before coming to you, if any. But some survivors do prefer mail because they're not really handy with a computer, and that's okay too. It's very common for us to have a survivor come to us with maybe the second or third letter they've received from FEMA. So there's a little bit of digging to do, but you just read the letter if one is available. Or again, listen to the client. What kind of assistance did they receive? Did they not receive? Did they get any, do they have receipts or contractor estimates to prove that the amount of money they got was not enough? So those are things to consider when going through that initial client meeting or any follow-up meetings that could occur. So again, those general eligibility reasons that we talked about at the beginning, those are common reasons for FEMA denying assistance right off the bat. So you want to look at ownership, you want to look at the occupancy, and we have the definition of owner occupied there for you to review, but it's not uncommon for someone to be denied due to these reasons. So you might be able to help a client obtain the correct supporting documents, calling the clerk's office or looking at the maybe someone has a property tax receipt with the deed book and page listed on the receipt. So then you can say, oh, just call the clerk's office or run down there because a lot of time it's right down the street. And try to get that, or we can call on their behalf sometimes and help them obtain that as well. There are times where sometimes a client did not have a written lease agreement prior to the disaster. Thankfully, FEMA will accept a lease agreement dated within that 18-month period of assistance. So maybe you need to help draft a lease agreement in order to get through that proof of occupancy hump with a client. That's acceptable for FEMA as well if there is a renter. So again, identifying someone's identity. My household was impacted by the February 2025 storms. We weren't flooded because we live up on a hill, but we did have a landslide. It thankfully didn't touch our house, but it was going to be about $16,000 per the contractor estimate to get that removed and to try to put some hazard mitigation things in place. But, between myself, an attorney, my husband, who is an engineer by trade, and then my mother-in-law, who we live with, and has her master's, is also educated, we could not figure out how to submit the correct address on FEMA's online application because our Google Maps, our USPS, and then our Apple Maps address has 3 different cities and 3 different zip codes. So we did what we could for about 10-15 minutes to try to figure out what city we needed to put in the application. And then we got a letter saying, hey, we need that. We need your ID. We need your social security card or other document. So it's small in comparison to a lot of our disaster survivor clients, but I truly do empathize now with that frustration of like, well, what the heck? Again, insurance might come into play there. Client may have missed a property inspection, or they may have a prior flood insurance requirement or other reasons for why someone is denied. We've seen let clients get letters from FEMA saying that the home was safe to occupy. So getting a contractor estimate or attestation from a local official saying, absolutely not, the home is not safe. Here are all the repairs that need to be happened. Here they are sheltered, somewhere else because it is not safe to live there. Supporting documents are the way to go. And of course, you might also have some FEMA inspector issues. I was incredibly lucky to have a very knowledgeable inspector who asked a lot of really great questions. I didn't even think to tell her whenever she came, but that inspector, sometimes they aren't as well trained, and that's okay. You can request a new inspection. You just call the FEMA helpline, or or you submit that second inspection request in writing. Again, we just want to kind of harp on that prior flood insurance requirement. It's really important that if someone receives assistance this round and there's a new insurance requirement, they need to understand that that insurance requirement runs with the land forever. It does not follow the property owner. And they need to make sure that they disclose that flood insurance requirement moving forward if they ever sell or rent that property out to someone. So, like we kind of went over a little bit before, survivors are still eligible for some types of FEMA assistance if there's a prior flood insurance requirement. Again, it's incredibly limited, and it's been pretty tricky to get through these humps with our clients, but we're doing our best, and we're just going to keep pushing and hoping that the supporting documents we provide FEMA to show that someone is eligible, we're just going to keep it on. So piecing the appeal together, I see that we only have about 5 minutes left here in our discussion here today. So I'm going to try to speed through some of these slides. All of the documents and the how to draft a personal property appeal, for example. All of these things are available on our website, or will be available on our website. We can email them out. Anything that you might want, we are more than happy to share. So an applicant has 60 days from that date on the decision letter to appeal. Late appeals are not the end of the world, but it is absolute best practice to stick to the deadline. I had a very productive conversation with a FEMA voluntary agency liaison last week, who said if you don't have new supporting documents for your appeal letter, then it's okay to wait a little bit longer and just include that reason for the late appeal. So let's say, lack of contractor availability or accessibility in your area. In your appeal letter, you stick that reason in there for, please waive the 60-day appeal window because I didn't have a contractor available until 3 months out. So again, applicants can appeal a denial or ask for additional assistance. I see a question in the chat. Is that business days or calendar days for the 60? It's going to be calendar days. You have 60 total days, Monday through Sunday, or Sunday through Saturday, however the weeks work. You have 60 total days, not business days, unfortunately. That would make sense if it was business days, but here we are. Good question. With their FEMA appeal letter, they should absolutely include a request for their FEMA case file. That's going to include their inspection damage report, the mailroom report, which is all FEMA internal comments regarding an applicant. If someone calls on their behalf or the applicant calls, it's got all of FEMA's notes in there. So that's really helpful. And then any documents FEMA sent applicant, any documents the applicant has sent FEMA, that case file is very helpful. And then once an applicant submits their FEMA appeal letter, FEMA has 90 days to provide a decision. So that's really frustrating, for a lot of clients is, golly, it's, that waiting game, it just takes so stinking long. You want to make sure that you include a release of information form, and again, that request for a client's case file. FEMA does have, an appeal request form. You don't have to use FEMA's. Again, look at that big wall of text. It's very intimidating for a lot of our clients. We are more than happy to provide hours for you to type on, or if there's a pro se person who wants to write in some blank lines, or we can email them, we have those available as well. There are certain details that you need to include, like the full name, applicant's disaster number, the applicant's addresses, date of the appeal, on each of those pages that you submit, including supporting documents. You don't want to reinvent the wheel. Please use our templates. We are more than happy to provide them. In our templates, we've got highlighted areas where a volunteer attorney or a client, just to, say, hey, check these sections out. These might need to be updated or deleted. And then in our how to draft a whatever type of assistance documents, we kind of walked through and make sure that the person reviewing that template and updating it hits all of those highlighted areas. I see that we are at time right now. I'm going to keep going for a few more minutes. Again, this is being recorded, and I do appreciate everyone for participating and attending today. Feel free to keep those questions coming. Send an email to Erica and I if you have any additional ones and you need to pop off right now. But I'm going to keep going for a few more minutes to go through the rest of it looks like we've got 7 slides left. So please feel free to stay on if you're able. These FEMA privacy data cover sheets are included in our appeal templates. This is important to make sure that it covers the release of information form because, of the personal identifying information on the release of information form. We have this ROI. FEMA has this release of information form available on their website, in their library, and you can also find it just with a Google search. AppalReD has it downloaded to a Word document, and we can share that because it's a little bit easier to type on. But we do have this available and are able to walk volunteer attorneys or survivors through the different sections that are important to make sure you check the yes boxes in certain areas, like section B. That's where you really want to make sure you check yes. And then in section B, spot 3 there, you want to put request for entire FEMA case file in that section there. But again, this is all in our templates and all in our how-to documents. As I was saying, we've got these highlighted sections to bring your attention to where you need to update certain information, like the appeal heading there at the top, applicant name, and then going down through the template, the contractor information and phone number. If there's multiple estimates, making sure, again, you spoon feed FEMA. These are all of the receipts, all of the documents I'm including with this housing assistance appeal letter. Please reconsider me or consider me for the maximum amount available to help me repair or replace my home. And also, I would like to pull your attention there, the bottom of the appeal template there. An applicant can do a wet signature, but they can sign it, print and sign it there, or an electronic signature has been acceptable. So Due to lack of transportation or reliable transportation, we usually use that e-signature for our clients' convenience. And I know that they appreciate that too. Not that we don't want them to have to come to our office because we don't want to see them, but you know, life is still happening whenever you're a disaster survivor outside of the paperwork part. Again, insurance, making sure that if you did have homeowners insurance, did you get an insurance payment? Did you get no insurance payment because it was that your home was damaged by a flood? Homeowners insurance doesn't cover flood damage. So, you know, you need to make sure you disclose that to FEMA. Or if you didn't have any insurance at all, our template includes both of these circumstances here if someone did or did not. And our templates also include these just kind of general, hey, you need to insert something here. We have homeowners insurance documents as example on the screen. And then just a reminder, hey, remove this page before you submit this to FEMA. It's not the end of the world if you accidentally you know, leave that in with like a FEMA appeal packet, but you do want to make sure you review everything before actually submitting it to FEMA, and include any supporting documents that are needed with that type of appeal. There's a couple of different ways that you can submit a FEMA appeal letter. You can do it online through the Survivors Disaster Assistance.gov portal. Again, that's been tricky for some clients to get logged in. We are unable to access those portals unless we have the client on the phone or available to text or email us right then and there, because there is a passcode that needs to be shared. So, you know, that can be tricky to navigate unless the survivor is submitting their appeal letter on their own. Some survivors still have access to a disaster recovery center. It being September 2025 right now, I don't believe that any disaster recovery centers are still open for the February 2025 disaster, but sometimes folks there at the very beginning can go in person and say, hi there, FEMA representative, will you please submit this on my behalf? You can also mail it, and AppalReD is able to fax. We fax the majority, all of our appeals. Again, you want to do your absolute best to send appeal letters within that 60-day window. Not the end of the world if you can't. It's okay if you submit a placeholder appeal. The FEMA Voluntary Agency Liaison, or FEMA VAL, that we spoke with said, you know, it really clogs up FEMA's end of things if you just submit an appeal letter saying, I don't have any new information or documents, but please don't close me out. The FEMA VAL said, please don't do that, but if you makes you feel warm and fuzzy, you can. But again, it's okay to just include a statement asking for an extension or to provide a reason for a late appeal. For the 3 active disasters that Kentucky has right now, the February disaster, you're looking at August 2026. For the April disaster, that would be October 2026, and then May tornadoes, November 2026, as far as that 18-month period of assistance goes. You want to make sure that your disaster survivor client has as many supporting documents submitted to FEMA before those days. If at that point they still don't have as much FEMA assistance that you think they really should be eligible for, you know, again, having their FEMA case file and looking into that gives you more insight as to why FEMA maybe didn't give them more help. or other reasons that could apply for different situations. But please be very aware of these 18-month period of assistance deadlines. If you have any more questions, please email me, email my colleague, Erica Fields. She's the other disaster response attorney on our team. And then we also have a disaster team at ardfky.org email that the two of us attorneys and then our two wonderful disaster response paralegals monitor daily. Feel free to drop any additional questions in the chat right now if you have time or have any questions. And I appreciate you attending today. We will continue to update our appeal templates and checklists and our how-to documents on our website, and we'll always be more than happy to share anything by email for someone's use. And so thank you. We definitely appreciate it. I'm gonna stop screen sharing and just hang out here if there's any additional questions. All right. Okay, I think that, seeing none, I think that will conclude our FEMA appeal drafting training. Keep an eye on our website, shoot us an email, we're happy to help. But thank you so much for attending today and for reviewing this video. And thank you for everything that you do for disaster survivors.